Yvonne, Google it.
Gougelet? Hi. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I helped bring a bunch of these people here to speak today, so yeah. My name is Yvonne Gougelet. I'm a community organizer, investigative citizen journalist, and most importantly, I am an enraged American voter. I grew up in Florida, where the infamous hanging Chad ballot caused chaos in elections, so voter disenfranchisement hits home for me. Because of that election, which was stolen by George W. Bush, I have helped register thousands of voters across America to help empower them and educate them on voting rights. So I've registered thousands of voters for the past 10 years. First of all, I appreciate all that you do to help make the elections happen. I understand that it takes a lot of work and long, grueling hours to make an election happen and for it to be successful. But I'm here to speak on behalf of the hundreds of thousands of voters who were unable to vote. I've never seen anything like the chaos that happened 1 week ago today during the New York presidential primary elections. Like we mentioned before, the 60,000 postcards that were mailed to the newly registered voters stating that the primaries were in September, that was mistake number one. The hundreds of thousands of voters that were purged across the state of New York, 126,000 voters in Brooklyn alone, which happens to be the city that Bernie Sanders was born and raised, the largest city that was affected by voter purging in the state of New York. In addition to the hundreds of thousands of voters purged, thousands of voters parties were switched, making them ineligible to vote. We have cases of people who were registered but were turned away. Then finally, a small percentage of people were actually given affidavits and provisional ballots, but those provisional ballots weren't even counted. In addition to that, we've heard the reports of the poll site issues and them opening up late, machines being broken. We want all of the affidavits to be counted. We want for everybody who was turned away to give the opportunity to vote. We want an independent investigation. What can we do? What can we do to help you? We're here. We care. Please tell us what we can do to help you, because this is a very important election, and it's life or death for future generations, to be perfectly honest. Bernie Sanders versus Trump and Hillary.
Time's up.
Ada Vargas. Hello, my name is Ada Vargas, and I'm part of the New York Primary Problems group that is trying to bring light and keep you all here. And I wanted to say thank you for your explanation of much of this process earlier. As I understand it, this is a very long, cumbersome process to verify each voter. However, it is something that should never have happened to begin with. My question, in light of all of the comments that you made earlier, is if the board is willing to commit to having every affidavit counted before election results are certified, to rectify the gross mistake of such invalid results cannot be certified with any faith. If your commitment to, quote, restore the confidence of the public is true, will the board commit to counting these ballots before certification of the results for the state convention? This is as an absolute baseline. Will the board commit to having every affidavit counted and verified?
Some of those
to have every voter verified, and those that are verified to have those ballots counted before the May 5th deadline.
Mr. Ryan just said that.
Right, the painstaking explanation that we went through was to try to make that clear. It wasn't made clear. I will say it again. Every person that falls into the category of potentially invalid will be scrutinized. We're going to attach all of their voter information that we have in the system, including prior documents bearing their signature, etc. All of those affidavits will then be reviewed one by one. There's no way to automate this.
Yes,
right?
so my entire question is because of the process that you...
The is yes.
Okay. Because of the process that you mentioned was incorrect. No, my next concern was just, it is clear from this hearing alone that there just needs to be a simplification of this process, not only for the voters' sakes, but for your sake. So I hope that you will take into account a lot of the recommendations that were made of having either the deadlines all be consolidated in one, or have same-day registration, or if that is not under your jurisdiction, that you will push this if your commitment to restoring the faith is absolutely true. Thank you so much for your time, and especially if those votes will be counted. That is the main concern here.
Before
and
certification.
Before certification.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what we can't certify. Next speaker, E.C. Jacobs.
Hi.
I have to say that I was born in New York City. I've lived here for over 4 decades, and I've never seen anything like this in my life. It was the most embarrassing, dysfunctional, inefficient, and poorly run election I've ever seen. And I do understand from reading the papers yesterday that you've received a 10% raise. I know that 10% raises, which I've never received in my life, more than like 1%, not even. 10% raises come when you've done an excellent job. This was a horrific job, okay? This was not only a botched job, it was embarrassing to the people who call themselves native New Yorkers. I cannot walk around like this until this is fixed. I do not like paying for people that you keep asking me to come and volunteer. We should come out and stop our jobs and help you with this. No, this is your, I'm sorry, this is your job. And what it says today in the New York Times, excuse me, in Tribeca, because I have, I'm sorry I'm getting so angry. I'm so embarrassed. This is so denigrating to me. I went to Stuyvesant, I went to Cooper Union, I went to the great schools of this city, I was born in the New York Hospital, and I'm embarrassed as a New Yorker.
What's the poll site?
The poll site that I go to, because I am in a affordable housing program, allows me to live in the same neighborhood that I grew up in, which I could never live in otherwise, right? So I went to poll at Tribeca. You know how nice it is at Tribeca? You get donuts, you get coffee, and you get a massage. That's how nice it is there. Brooklyn, we know Brooklyn got completely robbed.
Time's up.
And no, my time is not up. I want to announce today, I'm sorry, I want to announce today that Bill de Blasio, since 2010, as the public advocate for New York, started investigation into the primary election process. And I'm sorry, but since 2010, he's had 6 years. I don't care. He's had 6 years to fix it. Now is not the time to fix it. It was last week.
Next speaker, please.
Sarah MacAllister. All right, girl.
We don't have donuts.
I got donuts right here. Here.
Good afternoon.
JACODS. I don't even like donuts.
My name is Dr. Sarah MacAllister. I'm here as a concerned voter. My polling place was in the Bronx. I didn't have any issues myself, but I am a CUNY professor and a number of my students did. So I'm partly here to speak on behalf of them. I will second a lot of the statements that were already brought up, and I don't need to waste time repeating them. But as a mathematician, I feel like it's my duty to call attention to the numbers. The exit polls were showing in the Democratic primary a 4-point spread between Clinton and Sanders. 45 minutes after the polls closed, the same media reported that Clinton had won the state by 17 points. Exit polls were designed to catch election fraud. And they're designed to make sure there's a maximum of about a 4% error in either direction. So either, even giving the polls the maximum leeway of inaccuracy, you would expect Clinton to have won by no more than about 8 points. A 17-point lead is statistically virtually impossible. This raises the question of election fraud and necessitates a full and independent investigation by a party with no stakes in New York City or state politics or the outcome of the election in general. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Beth Manifest for Jerry.
Next speaker, please.
She's coming.
Hello, my name is Beth Manifest for Jerry. I'm a
I was a volunteer and part of the Sanders campaign. I'm also a resident of the city homeless shelter system in Auburn, New York, where I actually voted just fine in my precinct. Except for the fact that, of course, when I looked online to check ahead to confirm my registration, because I did change parties in time, I wasn't listed at all. So you do indeed have a problem, as you've mentioned before, and it is a big one, with communication with the state. Because, again, if I have a card, and again, I was actually allowed to vote, but according to your online system, I'm not in any rolls.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
When did you register to vote?
I changed my parties effective in, I believe it was somewhere in the first week of October of last year.
As I had described earlier, there was an issue in the transfer of the file. So our voter rolls that we go by to make our poll books are not the searchable database that you're talking about. So that's part of that disconnect a little bit that we talk about. Why you would not see yourself in the state online system, but would still be in the book. So
If you voted, were you in the poll books?
Yes, thankfully. But again, I really do want to highlight to people that there was back and forth. And it is indeed an issue. Another thing, though, that I also want to highlight for you guys is the confusion with the concept, with the two constructs of both affidavit/provisional ballots versus voting by court order. And this is something that I was trying to get through to people, and in terms of passing around information about the fact that people could go to court and request, and people did, and meet people throughout the state, stood for hours and hours in line to get that right to vote regularly. So again, you have a massive number of problems. It really needs to be fixed. Thank you.
Megan Ahern.
Hello, my name is Megan Ahern. I'm Program Director for the New York Public Interest Research Group, or NYPIRG. So it's now clear that the Board of Elections tossed Brooklyn voters from the rolls, and part of that was probably illegal, and that's disgraceful. State laws were broken, and investigations should consider whether criminal charges are warranted. NYPIRG calls for the immediate reinstatement of all purged voters, and the board should release a step-by-step uniform statement detailing exactly how each of their 5 borough offices conducts voter purges before any further action is taken. A similar statement should be provided concerning voter registration protocols and procedures for placing voters on the inactive list. This will help people educate themselves and not be so confused, and provide clarity for advocates, I guess. Each and every affidavit ballot cast in last week's election by a purged voter should be ruled valid unless a new and independent assessment is conducted. I hear that you're doing that, thank you. Additionally, a speedy review of all other purges conducted by the Board of Elections across the 5 boroughs, not just Brooklyn, since the last presidential election should be conducted, and methodology and results made public and posted online. New York deserves answers from this body, and I have a few questions. Does a standardized written description of the procedures and timeline for purging voters or placing them on the inactive status exist more than just meeting minutes? And if so, will you provide a copy and provide it online? If not, are borough boards only provided with state election law as their guidance? That can provide confusion. And the board should identify if, how, and why any borough differs in its registration, purge, or inactive status protocols or timelines than any other borough. The board should also provide updated written responses to whether and how suggestions urged by the New York City Department of Investigation's 2013 report on the board's employment practices, operations, and election administration were implemented. And last but not least, We're also supportive of the city's pledge of additional funding for improvements like increased stipends and training for poll workers.
Okay,
And we
that's it.
urge the board to commit to treating this money differently and turning over a new leaf.
Thank you very much.
Erica Razuk. Erica?
Yes,
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Erica Razuk. I'm a resident of Brooklyn. I'm here speaking from my own experience as an individual. I am a human rights and anti-corruption lawyer. I've been practicing in that area for the last 11 years with Amnesty International and the Open Society Foundations. I'm now working independently. I'm also a certified fraud examiner. On the day of the election, I used the opportunity of my free time to volunteer to monitor polling sites, and I identified myself as a lawyer so that people could ask questions if they had it. And not only was my day a barrage from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. of questions about every single aspect of this voting process, it was also a barrage of questions about criminal law, family law, everything, immigration law. There was so much confusion as to who had the right to do what. I feel from a human rights perspective that the right of self-determination has been absolutely violated for most people in this city, because it's not just, as some others have already mentioned, it's not just the affidavit ballots that you have, it's all the ones that you don't have. And it's the impact of the lack of communication and the lack of clarity for the rest of the public. I think it's also the impact of the media that resulted, and the media around the so-called result of the primary, which is not really the result because the votes haven't been counted yet. So I would just implore this board, and I will be making the same, request of state agencies involved, that actually what you've presented is not enough. It's not enough.
Absolutely. Mitchell Cohen?
Hi, my name is Mitchell Cohen. I'm from WBAI Radio.
You
I'm
identified yourself as a voter.
And I'm a voter.
Okay.
And I live in Brooklyn, and I ran for mayor way back in the Green Party. Some questions about the sanctity of the voting lists themselves, given that they were changed and in Brooklyn and elsewhere. So I'd like to know how many staff members actually have access to the voting database. Who had access to cancel voters' party affiliations or registration, and even whether they did so or not, who had that access? What is the form of this access to the voter database? Does a staff member have to be present at one particular computer to access the database? Is the database networked across a number of computers? How many? Where are they located? Can they be accessed by staff online or even altered remotely? Is that in the cards here? And finally, how are the voting lists themselves safeguarded? How is access to the computers and the lists supervised, and who does the supervision? I feel that some people are being scapegoated on the election board, and there's a lot more to dig up here and to protect the actual sanctity of voting and prevent it from being tampered with, given the fact that 120,000 voters were removed somewhat arbitrarily from the voting rolls without why in Brooklyn, where I live. Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Diana Finch?
Hi, I'm a poll worker since before 2008 from the Bronx, And I wanted to let you know that the first problem on Election Day, we realized at 5 a.m. when we arrived, and it was confirmed by 5:15, we did not have enough staffers at our poll site, including no interpreter in a heavily Spanish-speaking area and not enough scanner operators to get the scanners up and running before voting started at 6.
Can you show your poll site with it?
I think it's number X0177 in the Bronx.
Just the name is.
PS 96, Richard Rogers School, 650 Waring Avenue. We think that this was because the notice to work was only sent to poll workers less than 2 weeks before the election. So a lot of people got the notice too late to be able to come to work. And I'm here to say that it was not just Brooklyn where there was a purging problem. There's been a focus on Brooklyn because one reporter for NPR decided to do a story on what she thought would be the increase in voters due to the increase in population and the intense interest in the election. At my election district, 16% of the voters, and only Democratic voters, were not in the poll book and needed affidavit ballots. Will the board commit to releasing the numbers for all the boroughs of the voter purges?
Yes.
There's nothing worse than to see the expression on people's faces when they were told that they were not in the poll book. Their first question is...
Just briefly. The release of the voter purge numbers was made on July 7th, 2015, at an open and public meeting that was recorded, that is available on a YouTube video on our website link. This is not something that just happened within moments before the presidential primary. So we don't have to commit to releasing them. The numbers were already released.
No, but I think that the numbers that the reporter was getting were the numbers of new registrations up to now, plus the numbers of people taken out. So it's not just numbers from July of last year.
What I'm saying is,
It's a full account.
that's the last purge
Okay.
that we did, large purge. If people die, or we get from the post office on the NCOA, the National Change of Address, every May, we do continue some of that maintenance work, but large maintenance events occur at specific intervals. So the last large maintenance would have been reported out in the July 7th meeting.
What's the YouTube channel?
It's right on our website.
What website?
The New York City Board of Elections,
Okay.
since the passage of the City Council's law to video, and now we live stream all of our meetings. So every meeting that we've had since that law went into effect, and I think it's 2 years ago, are available on our website.
Is there a list?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
By
video
date.
video
Yep.
archived by date, yes.
Video
It's video
archive?
archives, there's a tab on the screen.
Okay.
Google it.
Right, and so,
Commissioners meeting, New York City Board of Elections. If you Google it, it'll come up.
Thank you.
and that's the July 7th, 2015
Okay.
meeting where this issue was discussed.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
I also wanted to ask about the affidavit ballot. The affidavit ballot contains an envelope with a complicated, detailed form that has to be filled out by both the voter and the poll worker. What I would like to know is what happens to the ballots if errors are made in filling out the affidavit ballot envelope form. Is the vote discarded if, for example, a voter has forgotten to include her birth date on the form? What happens if an affidavit ballot has been submitted by a voter who is at the wrong poll site? And what happens when a voter is re-registered? Executive Director, you were quoted in a recent news article last week as saying that an affidavit ballot is simply a registration form and not a vote for a voter who is not found on the poll books.
Correct. That is in fact correct.
And is the, finally, is the party affiliation purged when you re-register a voter due to a move or due to an affidavit ballot? Do you strip them of their party affiliation, thus rendering them ineligible to vote in certain elections?
No,
Thank you.
we're guided by the form and what the individual checks on the form. So, a little bit of history. Years ago, at the poll site, there used to be two forms, a registration form and an affidavit. The State Board of Elections responded to, I understand, Stephen, the State Board of Elections responded to complaints throughout the state, and ultimately the statute was changed. And the state law requires this combined form that serves as both an affidavit for your ballot and a re-registration form. In addition to other concerns, there is what we call motor voter. So if you happen to move in the interim, you are eligible to vote at your new poll site. However, we don't have that information in the system. So yes, you have to fill out that form completely. You have to check your party affiliation in C. What do you want it to be moving forward in Section C? Above Section C, in Section A and B, there's space for you to say what party you're enrolled in, so that you're swearing to the fact that you're a Democrat or Republican, and you're swearing to your eligibility to vote in that particular election. So
What happens though if the voter makes a mistake on their affidavit ballot?
it depends on the error. It depends on the error, and we go through these on a case-by-case basis.
Not necessarily, it depends on the error.
Correct.
Actually, that does bring up a good point, something I wanted to bring up to the board. We do, which we will bring up quickly, we do have cases in the Bronx that are going on right now, me and Commissioner President discussed, where voters that were in the books, but for some reason received an affidavit ballot when they shouldn't have, filled it out incorrectly, where the staff was leaning to not count the ballot. Me and Commissioner Perez are leaning that because of clerical errors by our poll workers in the field, we should be counting the ballots. And I don't know if we want to maybe do that citywide, because of these issues, I'm sure, not just happening in the Bronx.
Yes, absolutely, and I think Commissioner Rendino, that brings us back to our discussion earlier where we told the boroughs to establish their lists, of valid, that are automatically valid, because we demonstrated that they should have voted, and then the presumptively, and I'm underscoring again, presumptively invalid, and that's the group that we're going to go through this heightened scrutiny. So, for example, if somebody simply forgot to check the box of party enrollment, but we can independently verify that they were in the poll book or otherwise registered, that's going to be the stuff that we're going to come back to the commissioners on a case-by-case basis and say, here, we have this group, what's the commissioner's ruling? And it sounds like the collective understanding is going to be that those votes will also be included in the count. And so, we at the executive level tried to make the filter as fine as we could make it, but we recognize that the people that are going through these affidavits are going to see it on a much more granular level than we see it here at the executive office, and they're going to present to us other scenarios that are going to require commissioner intervention and decision before the certification is completed.
Next speaker.
Marnie Halassa.
We're a team.
Okay, and
We're a
Elliot
couple.
Brown. We're a couple.
First, I'd like to ask the name of the company that counts our votes in New York State. Can you tell me the name of the company that counts our votes?
Board of Elections.
Which computer company?
There are two vendors
Right.
that are voting system vendors
Right.
in New York State. Election Systems and Software and Dominion.
I
However,
see.
the tabulation of those votes is processed by, at least in the 5 boroughs of New York City, is processed by the Board of Elections.
I see. Well, I'm very concerned about the difference between the exit polling data and the final results, especially in New
Just for the
York.
record, we don't have a final result. These are unofficial results.
The unofficial results so far. I'm very concerned.
And respectfully, when we speak of exit polling,
Right.
we start to stray into an area that smacks of pure political discourse. And we are a bipartisan organization that is designed to count the votes and not engage in that level of political discourse.
Well, that's what's troubling, because it is so partisan. In New York State, the exit polling data was 12% different. But in Arkansas, if you'll let me proceed, 6.7 in favor of Clinton, official count compared to the exit polls. Alabama, 15.7 in favor of Clinton.
Sir, respectfully, I understand.
Tennessee,
I understand
8.8.
that you're
Virginia,
trying-
4.5. Georgia,
Sir, I
12.4.
understand that you're trying to make a particular point.
Oh, I am.
But that particular point needs to be confined to the operations of the Board of Elections and not with respect to a political agenda that someone is attempting to advance. We're here and we're patiently trying to answer all of the legitimate questions with respect to the board's operation. But we cannot get involved in conversations that are clearly designed to move this conversation in a particular direction. So if you could limit your inquiries to our operations and your statements to our operations, we're happy to answer. If it's going to go off into a political statement that seems to be favoring one particular candidate over another, that's not why we're here.
If the computers are fraudulent, sir, then you're not doing your job. If these computers are flipping votes across the country and in New York State, 12%, that would seem to be your purview. Thank you.
That's where we have the 3%.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to convene to executive session, and for those for personnel and litigation matters.
We had asked to be able to talk about solutions in order to let the public bring forth their concerns. So we restricted our comments to the summaries of problems. But we would like an opportunity to engage with the Commission to hear whether the Commission is beginning the process of considering the Mayor's proposal and to urge the Commission to take advantage of the significant amount of money which has been put on the table, and also to urge the Commission to include the public in its determinations of the reforms that are being proposed. As one of my colleagues pointed out, we are aware that the Commission has already taken steps in some of the areas that the Mayor has proposed. But there are, we think, some interesting proposals that are a step in the right direction, and we're interested in knowing when the Commission will be addressing the possibility of that proposal, since the proposal has a June 1 deadline.
Respectfully, Ms. Lerner, as you can imagine, and you're aware because you've been in and around elections in New York for quite some time, given all of what's swirling around this particular election event, our singular focus is making sure that the votes are counted and that the certification is accurate. Once we complete that process, I'm sure we're going to have time to pick our heads up and focus in other areas, and we will get to that at the appropriate time. We're just not in a position to speak either intelligently or publicly on any proposals that are made by anyone right now, because we have to, like a laser, focus on getting this election certified and certified properly.
And simultaneously, we're also working on having another election in June. So there are board hearings and things scheduled. Our staff is busily working on objections and a whole bunch of other things that are all going on simultaneously. It's not like they were letting the grass grow under our feet at this point.
I understand that, and I'm also...
I can assure you that we're multitasking and that some of our commissioners are begun to review the mayor's proposal.
Great, thank you, and we look forward to coming
Back in future Commission meetings to discuss the proposal and other ways to move forward to assuage voters' concerns.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. For those of you that are not in the room after our executive session, we'll adjourn our Commissioners' public meeting for May 3rd at 1:30. And then we'll have a cover sheet review team after executive session.
Right, no.